Alright, it's been a little while, a couple days, been a little bit burnt out, so it took a while for me to think of anything to talk about, but here I am. First things first, yes, I'm still playing Demon Souls on emulator, and no, I'm not in the same place or even on the same file. I restarted, did some different things, got some different gear. Yeah, the other thing, new mic, so hopefully it sounds better. I'm still getting used to having a physical, like a large mic sitting on my desk. I'm, learning how far away I need to be from it, and, so if the volume's kind of weird, is what it is. I'll see if I can figure it out for the next one, but right now I just sort of wanted to start talking. Got a couple things to talk about. First thing I want to definitely talk about that's very relevant, PS5 stuff. That was unintentional. PS5, the whole situation around ordering a PS5 right now is absolutely insane. For a while, I had sort of gotten into the mindset of, I own Demon Souls on PS3, so and I can play it on emulator, and so I'm not gonna buy the new consoles. And then I slowly started looking at gameplay and all these little tweaks that have been made to the new one, and it's kind of dumb, but I basically went on the pursuit of buying a PS5 so I could play Demon Souls Remake. And oh boy, was that hectic. I had heard that people were having a really hard time getting orders in and all that, but I didn't realize exactly how difficult it was until I actually started looking myself. So first off, actually keeping up with PS5 stock is a game in itself, because there's no dedicated way to look at every retailer stock all at once. What you kind of have to do is be looking at all the retailers, and if you're like me and you don't like to just be looking at Walmart and Target and Best Buy and all these stores constantly, you look towards someone else who might be looking at this stuff and posting it elsewhere. And so, yeah, I had a burner Twitter account, and so I started following some people on Twitter who knew things about PS5 drops and would post about them. And I started following drops. The first couple I followed, there was one from Target that I completely missed. There was some bundles from GameStop that I completely missed. There was a Walmart drop a while ago that I actually had the PlayStation in my cart, and then at checkout it got removed because they went out of stock. So pretty rough. And in general, I was having pretty bad luck until the infamous Kohl's drop. So what happened was, I forget what night this was, but there was a while ago where on Twitter, an individual by the name of Aaron Payne, or his username, The Painster, Aaron Payne, supposedly an employee from Best Buy, posted on Twitter that Best Buy would have a stock drop that night. And nobody knew who this guy was, but his tweet sort of blew up. It wasn't that huge, but I think it was like a couple thousand retweets and stuff like that, when this dude was basically nobody. And people started, kind of flocking to him and asking him questions like, "Oh, are you really from Best Buy?" All this, because how do you know this stuff? How can you say this stuff? And I don't really know many of the details, but I just know Aaron Payne is a Best Buy employee who knew something about a Best Buy drop that night, and he gave a time, and that time turned out to be wrong. That time came around, and the Best Buy drop didn't happen. But what did happen was a Kohl's drop. Now, Kohl's is kind of the last retailer you'd think of that would have a PS5, but lo and behold, Kohls.com had some PS5 bundles, and that night I was on Aaron Payne's live stream, and I saw that people were getting consoles on Kohl's, and I got one. The problem with getting it on Kohl's is that Kohl's fulfilled a lot of orders that night. Kohl's had a huge drop that night. Kohl's had never had any drops before that, so I assume they had a huge stock compared to some other retailers. And so a lot of people ended up getting consoles checked out and paid for, including me. But then, throughout the next morning and the next, the following days, they had to start canceling orders because they way overestimated how many consoles they actually had in stock. So my order bounced back a couple hours later. And what sucked about that was that rumored Best Buy drop that Aaron Payne had tweeted out about ended up happening just 3 or 4 or 5 hours later than he had anticipated. And so everybody who thought the Best Buy drop wasn't happening had gone to bed. Everybody who had secured a console on Kohl's had gone to bed and obviously wasn't going to go and get one on Best Buy as well if you'd already gotten one on Kohl's. So a lot of people missed the Best Buy drop, which the people who participated in it had really great luck, to my knowledge, and instead got kind of screwed over. And so from there, it kind of went back to the same old story of, rumored drops or official drops, but really low stock, and in general just a really hard time getting your hands on it, even if you knew when a drop was happening. And so today rolled around, and Walmart had a drop scheduled for today in the evening, and they had announced it about a week in advance, so it was a pretty high profile thing. Everybody knew that Walmart was dropping at the exact time, and this was a little bit nerve-wracking. This is sort of the breaking point for a lot of people, where it's like, oh, they've been following this for 1, 2, 3 weeks, a month, or there are people, I'm certain, that ever since pre-orders went live a couple months ago, or a month or two ago, that they've been trying to get orders in, and they just haven't been successful. And it's been a while. So Walmart tonight was kind of like the last known definite chance to get your console. But it was scary because it was high profile, and the last time Walmart had to drop, their entire site crashed. And so I was sort of on that same bandwagon of if I don't get it tonight, I probably won't get it until it becomes a regularly available item. And I got ready for the Walmart drop, and it started out really bad. I was on my phone and on my computer. Tried adding to cart. It was not working out. The add to cart button was completely bugged. The site went down by the time it went up for me. The add to cart button was gone. But it had a message saying, item is temporarily out of stock. Now, normally when these drops happen in one of two ways. They either happen in waves or they happen all at once. Smaller retailers, I think there's this website, Antonline, that I was saying about on Twitter. Smaller retailers like that will do surprise drops with one set of stock, and when they sell out, they're done. But bigger retailers like Walmart and Best Buy and Kohl's even did them in pieces. So basically, they would release a certain amount of stock at a certain time, and then after that stock sold out, a couple minutes would pass, and then they would post the next set of stock. And it was just starting at a certain time for the next 20 minutes afterwards. They would just post little chunks of their stock. So that people that maybe missed the first wave could get the second wave, or the third wave. So I missed the first wave of Walmart drops today, but in between the first and second wave, I was in Aaron Payne's Discord because him and some of the people in his Twitch chat and Discord and whatever actually had some pretty decent info about the PS5 drop situation. Someone in Aaron Payne's Discord posted a link from somewhere. I don't know where they got it, but it was a link that most of the links I was seeing were just taking you to the PS5 product page on Walmart.com. Whoops. And then from there you have to press add to cart, and then you have to go through the whole process. Well, this link that this person posted in Aaron Payne's Discord skipped that process. It was a link to directly add the product to your cart. So you didn't go to the product page, you went to a added to cart page, and then you just went to your cart. And that was where the big snag was happening, was the add to cart button. And so getting to circumvent that made it so that I was able to get through and actually check out. So this is the second time I've checked out on a PS5. I'm hoping that because it's Walmart, it's not going to bounce back. And it was significantly cheaper because this was just a PS5. On Kohl's, I checked out with a bundle for some, it had extra controllers and stuff like that I didn't necessarily want. So I saved a little bit of money in the process. So yeah, my Kohl's money has come back, so I was good to get the PS5 from Walmart. But yeah, so pretty wild adventure. And who knows, it might not be over. If I wake up tomorrow or the day after and it turns out my Walmart order's been canceled, I might be back on the wild goose chase to try to find an available PS5 at not outrageous prices. And the scalping market has been absolutely unreal. In terms of how many they've acquired, I saw an article. There's an article been floating around today and yesterday that said something around or that one scalping organization, or like there are these people that make a bot and like sell it. They've collected somewhere around like 3,000 units alone from just their efforts as like a small group, which is insane. Where some people have been trying for weeks and haven't gotten even one console to own for themselves. These guys have been getting literally thousands to just resell and make a profit on. In terms of how much they actually cost, I mean, the cheapest consoles are marked up to $400, and the most expensive are like $2,000, $3,000, which is absolutely absurd. You shouldn't be paying that much for a decked out PC, let alone a game console that's supposed to be value oriented. But it is pretty frustrating when you're trying to get the console for a specific game or as a gift, since we're going into the holidays. I mean, that's the whole idea. And to just not be able to get it multiple times. And they're trying, man. Like, the retailers are doing, they're not necessarily doing the most to help the situation, but they're not doing the bare minimum. Like, they are doing things like one per customer or one per household. I know for Sony's queue, I sat in Sony's queue today, actually. I forgot to mention that. Before the Walmart drop, I sat in Sony's queue for like 45 minutes to an hour. And Sony's queue requires you to fill in a CAPTCHA, and then from there, it'll automatically refresh the page so that you don't have to touch anything, and if it gets you in, it gets you in. And I think Sony themselves have actually done the best job at controlling how their stock has been distributed. But most retailers, one per customer, one per household, you kind of need to have an account already set up with them to help the situation. It's decent, but it's still not enough for the bots to be completely blacked out. But yeah, so been very hectic. Hopefully that story is over for me. Supposedly, if my PlayStation 5 has gone through all the way and doesn't bounce back, it'll get here next Friday, which is super exciting. I'm really excited to try out the new controller and play good-looking Demon's Souls, because this game looks bad. 2009, yeah, the PS3 is not kind to this game. But yeah, so I'm pretty excited. I don't know if it was worth all the trouble, but I think it was an interesting experience, and the thing is, I'm young enough that I've sort of missed every other sort of big console launch, or even with the Nintendo Switch in 2017, I was like entering high school, like had no money and no interest in the Switch, because I didn't really want Zelda that badly, and well, I did want Zelda, but not badly enough to spend $400 to get the console and the game. So I kind of missed it, and I kind of wanted to be a part of this launch cycle. Once I realized that there was a game that I really wanted, like a specific purpose for getting the box instead of just I have the new box, I sort of sprung on it. And that's sort of why I didn't get an Xbox, because the new Xboxes, while they're really cool and they have quick resume and they ray tracing, especially on the Series X and all that stuff, they're really cool, and I'm probably gonna get one before the console generation is over. It's gonna be a long, like 8 years. I didn't want to get one at launch because there's no killer game. I can play Call of Duty Cold War or Assassin's Creed Valhalla on my PC just fine. And I really think that playing them on Xbox doesn't enhance the experience enough to make me want to get an Xbox for them. And in general, the only special use case that I've seen for the Xbox is that now there's a new workaround to get RetroArch working on Xbox officially through the inbuilt developer mode. So now you can, by like completely official, like, created by Microsoft means you can get emulators running on your retail Xbox without modifying it whatsoever, which is pretty cool. But again, there's not that many classic games that I absolutely need to emulate, and there's not that many that I can't just emulate on my computer or even my phone. So while it is a pretty cool thing, it's not something I'm dying for. Demon's Souls is going to be stuck on PS5 at minimum for like a year, and at most it will be stuck on PS5 or PlayStation forever. I mean, you look at Bloodborne. Bloodborne came out like 4 or 5 years ago on PS4. It's still stuck on PS4. It hasn't even gotten a PS5 patch, let alone a PC release. So yeah, and Demon's Souls is pretty special. The new content with the door and all that. There's this whole new door added by Bluepoint. I'll probably leave a video link in the description if I remember. But yeah, in general, I think the Demon's Souls re-release was significant enough for me that it made me want the new console. And the controller, the DualSense, is really, really enticing because I've only heard good things about the vibration and the haptic feedback and the triggers. In general, I think it's a pretty interesting thing, and people are sort of afraid that the DualSense will be a gimmick, because they think back about when the DualShock 4 was sort of announced with the touchpad and the motion controls on PS4, and how only a couple games use them. The difference, I think, with this is that the touchpad and motion controls don't fundamentally change the way you play a game. Motion controls in like shooters let you aim a little bit, and you can kind of use it creatively in some platformers. And the touchpad is really just a trackpad to get around the UI of the console a little bit easier to like draw stuff. It's not all that special. The DualSense is different because adaptive triggers allow you to like change how players perceive your game. Like having players have to put in physical effort to draw a bow or shoot a certain type of weapon or something like that. That's a tactile enough feel that it's genuinely more immersive and actually changes how your game plays on PlayStation versus Xbox or PC. And the haptic feedback is something that's been slow to adopt from like the Switch. The Joy-Con has haptic feedback. More accurate than just like the dumb rumble motors and like Xbox controllers and stuff. And while cool, it's not been used all that much because the Switch is a pretty limited machine in other ways, and developers are focusing on the Switch's other limitations. The PS5 has enough legroom in terms of things like performance and reliability and stuff like that in general, developers don't have to think about the little nitpicky stuff, and I think they can and will use the extra sort of liberties they have from the new hardware to do something really creative with the haptic feedback. And I think that could also enhance some of the VR titles on PSVR that don't support PlayStation Move, which I think exists, to my knowledge. Because haptic feedback is just immersive. It's nice when you like get hit by something and you just feel like a buzz. It doesn't even have to be all that accurate, but it's much better when they aren't just these like weighted dumb motors that just kind of turn on and off. Like it's nice when you actually have like a varied amount of feedback. And we've had that on smartphones for a while. I mean, Apple's Taptic engine and subsequent copies of it on Android phones have completely changed how you get like notifications on Android or on your smartphone, because they make it so that you can have like different patterns for different notifications, different intensities for different notifications. Apple sold it with 3D touch and all that for a while, and even still, when you long press on something, it'll vibrate differently. So haptic feedback is really, really nice, and the adaptive triggers are genuinely game-changing. So I really think the DualSense is not as gimmicky as the DualShock 4. I really think that the DualSense will actually change how games play on PS5, and that's exciting, because it could sway whether I get a game on one platform or not. Say like a re-release of Bloodborne comes out. Maybe there's like a Bloodborne Ultimate Edition or something, and it has DualSense support. I might just I might just get it on PS5 even if it does come to PC or something like that, because if it uses the DualSense to make the game just, more immersive, more fun to play, I think that would probably be more fun than to just have the dummy controller, because I use an Xbox One controller, and I love the Xbox One controller. I love its shape. I like the weight balance. And specifically when using it with Windows, I love that Xbox One controller drivers are built into Windows 10, so I literally don't have to do any configuration. It will work in every program exactly how I expect it to as an X input device. But the DualSense is nice because of all the new features, and because ergonomically it's no longer unappealing. The DualShock 4 would have probably been fine. I would have been able to put up with its shortcomings in software on a PC if the DualShock 4 was actually comfortable to hold for me. And some people will find it comfortable, but on the majority, people don't find the DualShock 4 comfortable to hold, because it's kind of like these two sticks, these two like rounded cylinders sticking out of the controller, instead of like a contoured ergonomic, like the Xbox controller. So since the DualSense is so much more ergonomic in sort of the same directions as the Xbox One controller, I'm immediately more enticed to use the DualSense, because I don't think it'll get as uncomfortable as fast, and I think staggered joysticks, while nice for some things, can get a little bit old, and so that's why I like to use the Stadia controller sometimes, because it has inline joysticks and just kind of makes things feel different. It's a good change of pace. So yeah, PS5. Exciting. I have a lot of thoughts, but I'll leave it at that. Mostly because I don't have the thing in hand, so I'll probably talk about it more when I actually have it. I sort of promised some iPhone 12 mini content, and I haven't delivered on that whatsoever. But it's because I'm not really sure what to do with it. I'm kind of making the same promise with the PS5, and at some point I'll have a setup with the PS5 to do video capture. I kind of do, but I need a splitter before I can start doing that and really actually being able to use the console at the same time I capture footage. So that'll happen sooner, I think, than later. But with the iPhone, it's a little bit harder to make content, because I feel like I need to be creative with it in some way, and I feel like my thoughts with the iPhone are both not that unique, and also not really as game-changing as maybe I feel. Like, saying how it feels to hold something, or it doesn't really get the point across. And so I can sit here and talk about how much I like how much lighter it is, and how much smaller it is in general, how I can kind of just throw it in my pocket with anything else, and it doesn't, my pockets don't feel full. I can talk about the OLED display and how it's so much brighter and so much, but to an extent, there's almost only so much I can say about it that other people haven't already said. And I do genuinely enjoy the new iPhone, for all the reasons I listed, but I don't think it's special enough. I think normally when I get something new, when I get a new piece of tech, one of two things will happen. I'm either completely blown away and the thing continues to surprise me in good or bad ways, like the 5700 XT, which I will talk about in a moment. But in general, what happens is the other scenario, which is that I'll get something new and it'll surprise me at first, and then I'll start to see its shortcomings, and then I'll have buyer's remorse. Thankfully, with the iPhone 12, or the 12 mini rather, it's actually been the former. So it continues to surprise me in just general usability, how much faster it is than I expected, how much smaller and lighter it is than I expected, how much brighter and contrastier and nicer the display is than I expected. But in general, I don't think it's that big a deal to most people. It's sort of a nice thing to get to use, but it's not something that's so insanely unique that I can really say much more about it, because I feel like people have had the same experience with a new phone at any point, like you get a new phone that is better than the old one, and all you notice are the nice new things, and you just kind of use it until its time is up. The only time that didn't really happen with me was the iPhone 11, because I got the iPhone 11 out of frustration and wanting to change up what I was using, because my iPhone 7's audio IC had crapped out, and I had temporarily fixed it, but it broke again in February, and that's when I bought the iPhone 11, because I just kind of wanted to change it up. I was like, I'm sick of a small phone. I want a big display for watching stuff. And the iPhone 11 was a really good value at the time, and it was fast, and I just wanted something new. And it was a dumb decision. I really should have just sent the iPhone 7 to get fixed. I spent a lot of extra money in general around that time that I should have, in hindsight. But the iPhone 11 continued to disappoint me. Every time I picked it up, it felt just as heavy as when I had put it down. Almost like I wasn't getting used to how heavy it was. Every time I tried to grip it in a different way, because I've sort of tried to stop resting my phone on my pinky, because I feel like it bends my pinky out of shape in a weird way. And every time I tried to do that, I was reminded of how bulky the thing was, and in general, every time I watched a video or a movie on that big display, I was reminded of those bright borders on the sides because it was an LCD. And in general, the iPhone 11 disappointed me, which was kind of lame. I really wanted the iPhone 11 to surprise me, and it was fun to use for a while, but it slowly started to be more frustrating to use than not. And so I'm happy that I got the iPhone 12 mini and that the opposite happened. I'm really genuinely happy with it being so much smaller and so much brighter. But it's hard to, explain just over a voiceover. And that's sort of the content I'm comfortable with. While I think it could be interesting to go out and record something with a camera, it's just not something that I think I can do all that well or all that entertainingly. I think a voiceover is pretty listenable more than it is watchable, and I think that's sort of where my content works, because watching me die to the same skeletons for the 10th time in Demon Souls is only so entertaining. I'm doing my best here, but it is a bit distracting to talk and play the game at the same time when I haven't actually played this game all the way through before. But yeah, in general, I think there's nothing much I could really do with the 12 mini that's all that creative, but it's great. And I hope that sort of 5 minutes of me talking about why I can't make a dedicated video on it is sort of enough to explain why I really love it and why I'm not making a video on it. And I probably won't even make a video on the PS5, to be honest. I'll probably just start to include PS5 gameplay as soon as I get that HDMI splitter going, because I think it's just generally going to look more pleasant than this and be more entertaining for me to do than this. But yeah, aside from personal stuff, something that I've been really thinking about for the last couple of weeks, last topic of the night, I promise, is Apple's new machines, Apple's new M1 Max. And they have surprised me in more ways than one. See, my original anticipation with M1 was that the Apple's transition to ARM processors, from Intel processors to their own Apple Silicon. My assumption was that it was going to be similar to the old PowerPC to Intel transition, where Apple stopped using IBM PowerPC chips and licensed Intel processors and started using them. And when they did that, they created two pieces of software. One was called Rosetta and the other was called Universal. Or not pieces of software, but sort of runtimes. Universal made it so that developers could develop one app that had binaries for both architectures. So you could have your one app work on PowerPC and on Intel. And Rosetta was created so that you could run PowerPC apps on Intel machines, so that Apple wouldn't leave behind their entire install base, and so that people wouldn't have to start from square zero have to reinvent how they use their machine. They could kind of use their old software just under emulation. But what ended up happening was that the Intel processors, while more powerful and more power efficient than PowerPC, it wasn't a significant jump at first. The move from PowerPC to Intel was definitely a slow process into actually being worth it for Apple and for consumers. And so while the first Intel Macs were faster, they weren't significantly faster. They were just, it was like a 10-20% boost. And Rosetta emulation was just okay. The problem with the original Rosetta was that it ran at runtime, meaning you have a PowerPC app installed on your Intel machine, and every time you hit the go button on it, it has to rewrite its binaries to make it Intel compatible, and then it starts running the app. And Universal binaries also fell off because Universal lost support really early in a lot of apps. So a lot of apps had Universal at first, and then a year later were Intel exclusive apps, and PowerPC got completely abandoned, while Intel wasn't seeing that many improvements. It was still a positive change at the time, and really the best Apple and developers at the time could do. And it overall, it ended up benefiting everybody. So it was still a good move. But it was by today's standards pretty rough. So with the modern, with Apple's current efforts to move from Intel to Apple Silicon, the transition has been significantly more smooth, which I did not anticipate. I thought it was going to be a similar scenario where the Apple Silicon chips were really as fast or even slightly slower than Intel machines, because I really hadn't seen how in the real world. I'd seen speculation that these ARM processors could be really fast, but I didn't think that they would actually be significantly faster. I thought at most you get slightly faster than your base model machines. And so it surprised me to find out that, oh no, these new Apple Silicon machines are not just faster than the Intel counterparts they're replacing in the MacBook Air, 13-inch MacBook Pro, and Mac Mini, but they're not just faster, but they're significantly faster. So you're not just getting like a 1 or 2x performance boost in certain tasks. Sometimes you're getting like a 5x performance boost, because now you don't have an Intel processor that is undercooled and kind of being asked too much of whatever, video editing or any big CPU heavy task would kind of crush those mobile Intel chips. So it surprised me to see that the M1 is significantly faster than every Intel processor it replaced, and a lot of the higher end Intel processors in most tasks. And so first step, performance, better. Okay, impressive. Next thing, power draw. I expected power draw to be lower, but not significantly lower. Again, I thought this would be a gradual change, and I thought that that what Apple would probably have to do, because the cores were in my mind going to be so underpowered, I thought they were going to have to put a lot of them on one chip, and that just from having a bunch of cores that it would be hotter. Not hot the way the Intel chips are hot, but I thought it was gonna. I thought these chips, Intel processors, the Intel processors they're replacing in like the MacBook Air do like 20-25 watts, and in the Mac Mini and MacBook Pro, we're doing as much as like 80-90 watts tops, like highest power consumption. And I think that's not even the processor. I think that was total system power consumption. Well, power consumption on the M1 is, again, significantly better, where the highest power draw I've seen was still less than 15 watts, and that was on the highest spec Mac Mini, which, because all three machines have the same processor, but the Mac Mini has the best cooling of the three. Active cooling in the largest heatsink. So it was really surprising to see that, even given the most room, no battery tied to it, and with the highest thermal headroom, the thing was running at less than 15 watts, beating out literally every Intel processor that's ever been in any Mac in terms of power consumption, and that's total system power consumption again. And then even more impressive is that thermally, it's also not an issue, because these new Macs run significantly cooler than any Intel processor ever did in any Mac, because Apple likes their machines to be quiet, or as quiet as possible, for whatever power target. And these new M1 Macs cut temperatures in half, and cut fan speeds, because they're so much more efficient. So, okay, they're faster, they draw less power, and they're cooler. Okay, any downsides? Kind of no for the general consumer, because with Apple's original strategy to not leave people behind was Universal and Rosetta, like I explained. Rosetta 2 and Universal 2, however, are the sort of the new versions of those ideas for this new transition, and they are significantly better implemented than the original Rosetta and Universal. See, Rosetta 2 versus the original Rosetta, where the original Rosetta changed the runtime binaries of PowerPC apps into Intel binaries every single time you ran the app, so at runtime. Rosetta 2 is different because it changes those binaries at install time. So when you install an x86 application, it changes it into an ARM64 application when you install it. Not perfectly, but it's emulating those binaries when you install the application, so that they're ready every time you open the app. And Universal 2 is better because Apple's changed a lot of their structure in terms of how they give developers tools to make their apps, and so the main tool developers have to use to make apps on Macs and on iPhones is Xcode. And Xcode is really good because Xcode was essentially adapted to be able to be ported to ARM with very little headache. So there's a lot of developers that have Xcode stuff that they sort of just have to recompile for ARM, and it just works. And because Apple's made it so easy for developers to make their apps ARM compatible, they can use Universal 2 and bundle together the ARM version and the Intel version, and apps stay pretty small, but now they work everywhere consistently. So Universal and Rosetta are better than they were in the original transition. So software is good. The hardware is great. What about bugs? What about early adopter bugs? Well, bugs, from what I've seen, these machines, while not bug-free, have been pretty solid in terms of general stability. The most crashing I've seen, I haven't seen any crashing, and the most performance-related bugs I've seen have been solved with just simple restarts. Just general, process of elimination ways to troubleshoot slowness on a computer. You just kind of restart the machine and it fixes itself. In terms of expandability, that's where these Macs really suffer. They are not expandable basically whatsoever. The memory is unified memory, which is to say that it's not on-die memory, so the memory isn't located on the processor, but it's located very close to the processor, and it's BGA soldered onto the motherboard. So memory is no longer expandable. And it's only available in 16 gig options, which I'd argue is better on ARM machines, because ARM machines schedule their memory better, or Apple Silicon machines schedule their memory better than Intel machines. But I digress. Basically, and then the storage is also kind of a difficult scenario, because the storage is also not expandable, but the storage is also the best it's ever been. So the storage has got a huge speed up, even on the low end, even on the cheapest 256 gig models. The storage is capping out PCIe Gen 3 speeds, which is fantastic. You're getting over 2,000 megabits read and write on even the slowest drives. So there's an improvement to the hardware, but sadly there's a hit in terms of expandability, which, while I understand why it had to happen, it's a bit unfortunate. So, and repairability, I won't even go into that, because these things still aren't, water resistant or anything, so Apple's not going out of their way to exactly help these machines be durable, and because nothing's replaceable, you can assume that, it's probably not going to be very repairable either. So that's a little bit tough. In terms of feature parity is an interesting question, because outside of software, because these new Macs aren't one-to-one with the Macs they replace. Not all of them. If one by one, let's look. So the MacBook Air, I'd say, is basically one-to-one, because the MacBook Air before came with, I believe, one Thunderbolt port and one or two Thunderbolt ports, I think, and an audio jack. That was all of their I/O, and so the new M1 Max. And the big thing that people are harping on Apple about is that the new Macs don't support more than one external display on the laptops and two displays total on the Mac Mini, and there's one of them has to be HDMI. They can't both be Thunderbolt displays, and that's rough. But in general, the ports are still Thunderbolt, and they're still pretty fast, and there are just as many as there were before on Mac Mini. So Mac Mini hasn't taken a huge hit. Mac Mini or rather on MacBook Air. Sorry, a MacBook Air hasn't taken a huge hit. MacBook Air is mostly fine. Aside from that, any changes include basically just they move the motherboard around. It's smaller, and now there's a bigger heatsink and no fan, which I used to harp on the MacBook Air for not having a fan, but now that's not a big deal because the M1 is so efficient that even when it throttles, even when it gets at its hottest, the machine is not noticeably hot, and it doesn't slow down significantly. It's still faster than any MacBook Air before. So MacBook Air is mostly intact. MacBook Pro hasn't been fully replaced. MacBook Pro 13-inch hasn't been fully replaced because it's only replaced the lower end models, the two Thunderbolt port models. MacBook Pro 13 inches come in cheaper, two Thunderbolt port models and four Thunderbolt port models. And the four Thunderbolt port models have beefier cooling and obviously two additional Thunderbolt ports, so a lot more expandability. And I think they used to come with higher storage options and stuff like that. But now, with the M1 machines, they've only replaced the low end, the two Thunderbolt port models, and that's made it so that the budget MacBook Air or MacBook Pros have been basically completely replaced. But the nicer MacBook Pros with the four Thunderbolt port models haven't been fully replaced in terms of I/O, but they've been dethroned in terms of performance. So it's a weird gray area with the MacBook Pro. Mac Mini has been also partially replaced. The problem with the Mac Mini is that, again, the Mac Mini had four Thunderbolt ports, and it even had an option for 10 gig Ethernet on the Intel side. And so the new Mac Mini has replaced base model Mac Minis with lower end processors and the lower performance, the lower memory and lower storage options, but they still let you get a 6-core Mac Mini because you can't get 10 gig Ethernet on the new Mac Minis, and you can't get 4 Thunderbolt ports on the new Mac Minis. They're stuck with 2 Thunderbolt ports, just like the 13-inch MacBook Pro and with the MacBook Air. So they're not a complete replacement in terms of I/O and in terms of expandability, but they are essentially a complete replacement in terms of performance, even towards higher-end Macs. I mean, 16-inch MacBook Pro is not as fast as the M1 machines, which is insane because the 16-inch MacBook Pro starts at around $2,000 and can be as expensive as like $3,500. So it's not it's not an insignificant price difference. The cheapest M1 Mac is the base model Mac Mini, 256 gigs of storage, 8 gigs of RAM, and it starts at $700, which is an absolute steal compared to the 16-inch MacBook Pro on the Intel side. And MacBook Air starts at $1,000. MacBook Pro 13-inch M1 starts at like $1,200. So they're all really well priced for how fast they are. They've all got great software. In general, they're really, really great machines, and they've definitely surprised me. And not to mention, they're so efficient that they have fantastic battery life, just hours. They keep going. They're just like your phone. And their standby time, or when they come in and out of standby, it's super fast, just like when you unlock your phone. It's legitimately impressive how good these new Macs are, without really needing to be. Almost, they didn't actually need to be this fast, and this well-rounded of a product. And it's weird because this is first generation. This is technically the worst it will ever be. Performance on Apple Silicon Macs can only be faster than this from now on. I don't think it gets much lower than because base MacBook Airs also have one of the GPU cores disabled, so I don't think it gets much lower than one GPU core disabled and passive cooling I think I think they just refine the manufacturing process, and they strive to just kind of make them faster, and they're probably good from now on. So it's really impressive, and these machines also haven't gotten major redesigns, so they're very familiar products, which is kind of the safest move for Apple, because it means that they won't be scaring away new customers by separating SKUs with different visual, external designs. This isn't polarizing at all for any customers, and it's fast, and it's just a good product. I think the last time Apple made a Mac this interesting, I think, was the 16-inch MacBook Pro, because I don't even think the Mac Pro from last year was all that interesting. And what sucks about Mac Pro is that it's also starting to be replaced by the M1 machines, because the M1 machines are actually faster than Mac Pro in certain scenarios, or as fast as Mac Pro, and Mac Pro it can be tens of thousands of dollars. So it's kind of insane that these new machines are so good. But it's weird, because, like I said, with repair's kind of gone on Macs. You can't really fix them anymore. You're sort of stuck with whatever Apple support gives you, and just trying to generally be smart about how you use your machine and try not to break it. There's nothing really you can do to fix these machines after they died. I mean, even the current machines, the current Intel Macs, aren't really repairable in any sense, because things like controllers and stuff like that from like big companies like International Rectifier, which is like one of the main suppliers of like voltage controllers in the entire electronics industry. You can't buy certain IR chips that are on exclusively on Apple machines, because Apple doesn't want you to fix them. And that's how it's going to be with the new M1 machines, but even to an even greater extent, because now the only way you can get components for an M1 machine is from another M1 machine, meaning we're going to need donor boards, and donor boards aren't going to happen for a long time, because it's already hard to come by donor boards for Intel machines. Imagine for M1 machines that are brand new. It's not really as simple as just get them out in the wild, because as soon as Apple abandons M1 as well, as soon as Apple actually changes the design and updates the processors, now you're leaving behind certain components and stuff like that. So repairability is kind of in the dumpster, and that sucks, because aside from that, repairability and expandability are in the dumpster, which sucks, because aside from that, the machines are great. And they're really enticing, and they're really well priced, and I really want one, to be honest. But it's a lot of money for a machine that I don't really need personally. I mean, while I don't have all those great features in any laptop or anything I have, I certainly have a laptop that can get me through the day, and that, does all the things I needed to do in terms of like doing homework assignments and checking email and watching videos. Which that was something that I had to think about when I was thinking about getting a new Mac. Was like, well, what would I use it for? Because normally when I think about what I do with a new machine, is I think about gaming performance, because I'm a PC gaming enthusiast, and I'm thinking about performance in games specifically when it comes to making a new build, a new desktop build. And so that sort of translates to almost every machine I get, even if it's not related to gaming. I'll still think about its gaming performance, because that's sort of a go-to. But the M1 Max, while they have decent gaming performance through Rosetta emulation, I don't think that's a long-term thing, because I don't think developers are going to go out of their way to make games for a platform that's notoriously been unpopular for playing games on an architecture that's unique to where everyone else is playing games, which is x86 on both consoles and on PCs. So in general, I don't think gaming can be a use case on the new Macs, which is unfortunate to hear, but is sort of is just kind of how it's going to be. And so what I had to consider was, well, outside of just kind of being a kid about it and just playing games on my computer, what other use case do I have? And I realized I'm a pretty simple person. I don't do much else but write up documents for school, watch videos, answer emails. I don't do much on my machine. The one thing I do that genuinely a Mac could not do that I'd need like an iPad for if I wanted to go Apple, is do note taking on a Windows machine. And I have my, I have a way, I forget, but I have a pen, and I have and my HP is Windows incompatible, and I take notes on my Windows machine I couldn't do that on a Mac. So if anything, I'd be losing out in terms of use case. The only thing I gain from a Mac is that the screen is nicer and the battery life's better, and I don't even fully utilize the performance of the Ryzen 5 in my Windows machine, let alone the performance of an M1 Mac. For me, it's sort of unfortunate because my use case doesn't really work on a Mac. And these Macs are really made for an audience that's tolerating of a lack of customizability for the sake of ease of use, and that's not really me. I think an M1 Mac would be fun to mess around with, but I don't think it's something that I need or that I'm specifically looking for, because it's not within my use case. Because, at least for now, gaming is in some small way part of my use case. I hardly use my laptop outside of the basic tasks because I play games, and I have a desktop machine that I can do that with. So the M1 Macs are great. I really, really like them, and I can't wait for Apple to start changing up the designs of the machines externally and the designs of the processors internally, so that we get more than just an 8-core ARM machine. I think it would be really cool when we get maybe a 12-core or a 16-core. I think that's when they start putting in more of the performance cores. I think that's when these Macs will really, really shine, and start to really, really compete with desktop class performance within the Mac lineup. I'm excited to see whatever Apple Silicon iMac there is. I'm excited to see what an iMac Pro would look like. I'm excited to see what a Mac Pro would look like. I'm excited to see if they would potentially bring back the MacBook design, because the MacBook was refreshed in 2015, and that thing was a crapshoot, and they never brought it back after that. But they've got new keyboard designs, and they've got new processors that are more reliable theoretically, and that don't require as much power. And so I really think they can bring MacBook back. And so, excuse me. So yeah, I really think that there's a lot of potential here, even if it's not really for people like me. So very excited about M1. I just don't think it's for me, and I think it's gonna be this is gonna be something I look at from afar. So M1, pretty cool. To move on to the last topic of this video, which is getting very long at this point, and I don't even know if I'll upload it until the morning. I'm really sorry if you're still listening. Thank you sincerely. I really appreciate anybody who's still listening to this point. Regardless, final topic. The 5700 XT woes are no more. I have decided to bite the bullet and just sell it. I sold it for pretty cheap to my boss. My boss does crypto mining, and crypto's been popping off lately, and it just so happens that there's some new ways to get some really good mining performance out of the 5700 XT, and so I sold it to him. And it's been an Ethereum mining workhorse since then. And honestly, I'm happy. I'm sticking with the 980 Ti for now, while I wait for my funds to build back up from the new phone and from the PS5, and for me to start saving up for, a new Ryzen and a new like a 3070 or something. And until then, I think the 980 Ti is going to do just fine for me. I mean, I haven't really pushed my graphical performance all that hard in general. I don't need much more than 60 FPS at 1080p, and anything more than that is just kind of nice. Just a convenience, just a nice to have. So 980 Ti is probably more than enough for what I need right now, and I think it's going to do great. 5700 XT was just giving me too many issues, and I really was having a hard time thinking about how reselling it would work to just anybody else, and I was having a hard time thinking about what RMAs would look like in the future for that kind of stuff. At least where it is now, I know that what it's doing isn't dependent on things like drivers and stuff that are faulty. This Linux environment that it's running under now isn't using the same drivers that are on Windows, and it's certainly not using Radeon software. And I know that it's in capable and intelligent hands, because my boss is a pretty smart guy, and he knows what he's doing with the stuff. So I feel pretty good about where it's gone, and in general, I think this is a better use for it. This is a pretty low risk scenario. I mean, just stressing the memory and kind of not doing anything else is probably the best thing that card can be doing. So yeah, it's gonna be. It's sad for me, because I did sort of have an emotional connection to that card, but I knew that I had to let it go, because it just wasn't that good. I had to acknowledge that it only really ever gave me issues, and that if I wanted to let my my machine have an actual upgrade path from here on out, that I'd need to get rid of it, because feasibly it was fast enough that I would never need another GPU for another couple of years, but it was buggy enough that I would that entire time be frustrated with that being my fastest GPU. So yeah, I'm really happy about where it's gone and what it's doing now, because honestly, no better task than just avoiding all of the issues I've had with it, for it to just mine away all day on Ethereum. And in terms of what card I'll get next, whenever I build up the money again, I'll probably get a 3070, but the 3070 will probably come after a 5600X, and I'll probably get a 5600X in January when the new BIOS is coming out, so I won't have to get a new motherboard so soon. And yeah, I think if I got a new graphics card right now, I'd be hitting a CPU bottleneck once again. So I'll get a new CPU, and then from there, from that induced GPU bottleneck, or not really bottleneck, but I'll get a 3070, and I'll start doing ray tracing and stuff like that. And I think that'll be a lot of fun. In general, I think I really think that stuff like the 5700 XT are sort of short-lived in how first generation they are. I think that's something interesting about how some people do, like people like AMD do first generation products, where it's sort of a crapshoot, but if it works, it works, and it's fast when it does work, but when it doesn't, you're kind of screwed. Whereas with Apple, at least with the recent release of the M1 chips, I think this is the most impressive first generation product I think I've ever seen from Apple or anybody else. So yeah, I really think 5700 XT was sort of short-lived. I think the 5700 XT always had a place in benchmarking and like the overclocking scene for people that like AMD, and on Mac OS, funnily enough, I think the 5700 XT was one of the best Mac supported GPUs, and it does really, really well in Metal performance. It just sort of it's just okay in DirectX 12, and it's pretty good in Vulkan, but it does great in Metal, and Mac OS is perfect for that. So yeah, I really think the 5700 XT was sort of not really meant to be in my system for all that long, but it was a learning experience. I learned to not get caught up in the hype of a new product just because it's new, especially in terms of GPUs, and I learned to roll with the punches when you start facing issues, because if you're gonna have issues, you're just gonna have issues, and you just gotta work with it. But I'm genuinely happy that I had the time I had with that card. It is a really good card. The physical, the Gigabyte card that I bought was a really nice card and had good memory cooling, so I'm happy that it's doing memory intensive stuff right now. But yeah, so rest in peace, 5700 XT complaints, because it's gone for good. So yeah, anyway, if you've listened to this far, it's been about an hour, and I really appreciate you giving me an hour, or if you're on 2x speed, 30 minutes of your time to at least have me going in the background, even if you didn't listen the whole way through. I really appreciate if anybody is listening to this. I hope the gameplay was interesting. I did finally get past those skeletons, as you saw. I banged out 2 bosses in a couple minutes, and I really didn't expect that. Those were basically first-time fights, so I'm pretty happy with the gameplay, and I'm pretty happy with the topics. A lot I was thinking about. I'm happy I just sort of made the video. Again, I don't know if this will come up until the morning or the afternoon of Thanksgiving, Turkey Day. If it does and you're in the States, happy Turkey Day. If you're anywhere else, happy Thursday. Great day of the week. So anyway, again, thank you very much for listening, and I hope you come back next time. See you later.